The world has no shortage of strategy. What it lacks is the honest accounts of what delivery actually demands. I am Mohammed Younus, and this is the execution gap. Today's guest build a framework used by athletes, executives, and now we are about to test it. Organizations of thousands of people. Dre Baldwin is the creator of the Execution Reliability Index, author of the Third Day, and the host of the Work on Your Game, one of the longest running daily podcasts in the world, over 3,000 episodes. Dre, welcome to the Execution Gap.
I'm excited to be here, Mohammed. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So, what inspired you to create the Execution Reliability Index? In practical terms, if I am a CFO listening right now, what does the execution reliability actually mean for my team?
Well, I came up with execution reliability really just digging into my own history and my own work, seeing what I've been doing for myself, not just in terms of material that I put out, but just the way that I operate myself, and then looking at the challenges that I see in people who I come across in my audience, clients, prospects, etc. And I realized that the biggest challenge that people have that I have not addressed, I've addressed a lot of challenges people have, but one of the biggest ones is this execution issue, because the biggest thing for most people is not the plan itself or the strategy of what to do. Many people will say that that's what they're missing, but most people already have a pretty solid idea of what to do. The challenge is actually doing it. And then why are they not doing it? So a lot of people will then default to, well, I just need to feel like it in some way. So that's when you get motivation, discipline, mindset. And that's often not the problem either. The problem is you're just not executing on what's there, because there are times that you don't have motivation or whatever the proper mindset, whatever you want to call that, energy, emotion, but you're still not doing the job. How do we make sure that the job gets done? And when the job is not being done, how do we catch it as soon as the drift begins in order to make sure we get back on the ball? Because what we don't want is to get to the end of the quarter or the end of the season, or in sports, the end of the game, and then realize that we were having problems with execution. We want to make sure that we catch every execution issue as soon as it begins so we can be immediately corrected, because human beings respond to consequence and incentive. And that consequence is catching things and correcting it right there in a moment so we can all get back on the ball, especially when you're dealing with professionals.
So, how is it different from just a discipline?
How is the execution different from discipline? Well, discipline is, first of all, is not a personality trait. Discipline is a description of a behavior. So when someone is doing what the structure tells them to do, and they do it in a consistent way, then when we see that, we describe it as discipline. So when you execute reliably, then people would describe it as discipline. It's not actually, what's the word I'm looking for here? It's not diametrically opposed or that much different from the concept of discipline. But what it's about is making sure that the execution is reliable, which is a disciplined way of behaving, is the best way that I would describe it. So we usually talk about discipline when we're talking about an individual person or maybe an organization, such as a military organization. But execution reliability is about, how do we know that everything in our system is going to be pulled off the way that it's supposed to be pulled off and work the way that it's supposed to be worked on a consistent basis with very little variance in between executions? That's the reliability part of it. How can we know that we can rely on the execution done the way it's supposed to be done?
How do you distinguish an execution problem from a prioritization problem, a governance problem, or just a resource constraint? Leaders are actually often mislabel one as another.
Yeah. So leadership is making sure that everyone in the organization is on the same page, that they are following the authority of the person who is in charge, and everyone is executing their job the way they're supposed to execute. Now, leadership's job is actually to make sure that operations are running properly. So leadership, let's just call that the CEO or the owner of a company. They are in charge of making sure they're checking with their second level, their lieutenants, which often includes the operations department. So the head of operations, let's just say sometimes that's the same person. The owner is the person operating, or if it's a separate person, leadership goes to operations and they just want to know that everything is working the way that it's supposed to. Operations' job is to check on the execution. The person who runs the day-to-day in a company, That's the operator. Their job is making sure that every task in every department is running the way that it's supposed to. And they go and they check on things. They see when execution is slipping. They see when there is some type of drift. They see when some project looks like is going to be completed late. And then they go and make those fixes right there and then before it becomes a bottom line issue, which is where the executive level would find out what's happening. So, or the leadership level would find out what's happening. So the operations person is responsible for that. And if they happen to be the same person, then there is no difference. But if they are two different people, then again, leadership checks on operations for the bottom line outcomes. Operation checks on all the other lines to make sure the bottom line looks proper when leadership gets a hold of those bottom line numbers.
Yeah.
Where do large organizations most commonly break down? Usually it's in the fact that the larger the organization, the easier slippage occurs simply because it's harder to catch slippage when you have 1,000 people than it is when you have 10 people. So if I have 10 people in my organization, I can see when one of those 10 is not doing what they're supposed to do because I know all 10 people. I know their names. I know what they look like. I know what their job is. But when I have 100 people or 1,000 people, it's much harder. I don't know everybody. I'll be walking through the offices and I walk past somebody who's been here for 6 months and I never met the person. They don't even know who I am. They may know the boss's name, but they don't know my face. So at that level, you have to have an execution layer, some layer on top of your system that catches the slippage as soon as it occurs and immediately corrects or alerts about that slippage so that it doesn't go undetected. Because the larger the organization is, the easier it is for slippages to be ignored, undetected, not fixed, and they just continue. They become the normal part of the process. So you look at any big bureaucratic organization, this is pretty much what happens. You look at any government, especially let's say here in the United States government is a very bloated organization. And because it's so big, it's hard to catch slippages because who's in charge of catching all those slippages is too many people. So that's what happens when an organization gets very big. What happens is you start to scale inefficiencies. And this can happen in any business. Inefficiencies get scaled because money is coming in, the company's making money, but there are these small drifts that are occurring that are being tolerated, and the success of the business is basically absorbing those drifts. The problem is the bigger the organization gets, the more problematic those drifts become, and those drifts start actually hurting you. So this is the way that if anybody knows anything about businesses when they expand and they scale, is that sometimes the bigger your business gets, the worse position you get into because the more customers you have, the more money you take in, the more execution matters, proper execution matters, and your business will break at $100 million, whereas at $10 million, you were doing fine. So the bigger you get, it actually hurts you more because your problems did not get fixed when you were smaller.
So your execution reliability index map where execution breaks, right, at the individual level. I want to push on that today. Does the same breakdown happen at organizational scale? And what does that execution reliability look like for a person failing individually or like an entire leadership function of 500 people?
So for the one person, the operations head, let's say that's the COO. So let's say the COO notices that there's some slippage happening with one individual person. The job of the COO is to already know, okay, when this type of slippage happens, based on our history, what we know about slippage at this position on this job and at this time, here's the fix that we need. So the person in charge of operations, they somehow, some way, whether they need to go through other channels or they go directly to that person, they know that this is probably what's causing it. They apply that fix to help that individual person. Now, if we're talking an organizational level, let's say the slippage is happening amongst hundreds of people. Well, we look at a few things necessary. Is something that we're missing resource-wise? Are we not providing enough leads to our salespeople? Is our parts department missing a part? Or is there something broken in our factory to where people cannot complete their jobs because the tools are not working? So we want to look, if you're noticing the same slippage happening with everybody all at the same time, then at some point we look at the entirety of the process or the system and ask ourselves, is there something in the system that is causing this to happen with everyone? But if it's an aberration, is only happening with a handful of people amongst hundreds, then we can go and check on those handful of people and see what fixes or what resources they need to actually do their jobs.
So can the ERI framework be applied to the organizational scale, or does something fundamentally change when you go from one person department?
you would look at the person in charge of the department. So the ERI is not something that we would call, let's say I have a company of 500 people, right? And let's say we have
Mhm.
10 departments with 50 people in each department. I would not
Right.
have a company wide meeting with all
Mhm.
500 employees and say, hey, we're going to start using this thing called ERI. That's not what we do, because the individual person is not going to be using the ERI, let's say the dashboard. They're not going to be looking at the dashboard every day. So this is not an extra task for everybody in the organization to do every day, because now we have
Mhm.
this new thing. What would happen is, me as the owner of the company or the head of operations, I'm meeting with the 10 department heads, and the 10
Right.
department heads are now going to know that this layer has been installed in our overall system. Me as the head of operations, I'm the one who lives inside of the dashboard. I'm the one looking at the dashboard every day. I see what's
Right.
happening. So I can go to the head of this department, department number 6, and say, hey, I'm noticing some slippages happening in this part, and that part. Do you know about these? What are you all doing with this? What edits needs to be made in order to get this fixed? I'm talking to the heads of departments so that they can make their adjustments. But what ERI is not going to do is give an extra task to everyone in the organization, because first of all, they're not going to go and log into a dashboard every single day and do extra stuff. They probably already have a dashboard they got to log into. So we're not adding work there. What we're doing is giving it to the operations department, and their job is to or ERI's job rather, is to work the same way in the operations department that a smoke detector works in your house. So when people have a smoke detector in their house, a smoke detector on most days, most of the time, is not doing anything, right? It's just sitting there and it's monitoring the situation. But it knows, based on a combination of several factors, that
Right.
if they get all these factors hitting all at the same time, kind of like a combination lock, okay, there's a fire in the house, and that's when it starts beeping,
Mhm.
right? That's the way a smoke alarm works. And it's the same way that the ERI works. It only starts beeping when it notices, based on several factors that it is monitoring, that something is
Mhm.
slipping here. That's when it steps up and says, hey, something needs to be done in this area for this reason, because we see this pattern. Does that answer your question?
Right. So, talk to me about the third day. What happens when an entire department hits day three and the leaders is not in the room to push through? What's the structural fix, not the motivational one?
So, third day came from my background in sports with athletes asking me,
Okay.
what is it that keeps an athlete coming to the gym every day to train, even though some days we don't feel like training, we don't feel like working out, no, we're not motivated. And what I explained to them is that on the first day of anybody doing anything, and this is the proverbial first day, it doesn't have to literally be the first day, but at the beginning of something, everybody's excited and they're doing what they're supposed to do, following the rules, operating the system to a T, etc. On the second day, that's when you start to get maybe a little bit of drift from some people. And then by the third day, you find out who is serious and who's not. Because the third day is, again, doesn't have to be 1, 2, 3 days in a row. The third day is the time period in any project or in any career when the new car smell has gone away. The welcome party is over, and you find out who's serious about doing the job versus who's not. Because the third day, you're not motivated or excited anymore. And all that's left is just the work. And
All
no
right.
matter what you do for a living, no matter what company you work for, what industry you're in, even though it may
Mhm.
seem different from the outside looking in, there's no job in the world where everyone always feels like coming to work. So I don't care what it is.
Sure.
Professional athletes, social media influencers, podcasters, CEOs, supermodels, nobody feels like working every day, because every job, eventually it becomes a real job where there is just
All
work,
right.
is not exciting, is not sexy, is not fun. And you have to do that. So the
Mhm.
third day is all about not the occurrence of this day when you realize that it's not all fun and games. It's the decision that you make when you realize that it's not all fun and games. Do you decide to continually show up and do your job anyway? Or do you decide not to? And that decision is what
All right.
separates the pros from the amateurs. That's the concept of the third day.
It's a very great concept. I really like it. So, how do leaders create the accountability without creating the bureaucracy? That is the tension every CFO I talk to is wrestling with the same question, that leaders create the accountability without creating the bureaucracy or the governance.
Without creating that bureaucracy? Well,
Right.
it's several things. This is the reason why the ERI is created, because the ERI becomes the accountability process that is not a human being. Because if I'm the leader of a department and operations told me that 3 of my staff are slipping, they're drifting off of the process, and I normally would have to go to them and say, hey, you're not doing this, you're messing up on this, you keep missing the mark on that. Now it becomes a conversation between me and that person, and they may be looking at me like, hey, why are you always picking on me? Why are you always calling on me? And now it becomes an interpersonal issue between me and that person, depending on how they want to take it and how I deliver, my style, all of those things. This becomes HR issues, human relations issues. Now, instead, if the system or the layer that we call ERI is showing them, hey, we're noticing this drift early. This is before the situation even occurs. And we step in then, and the system is actually telling you, hey, let's fix this. Let's get this done. Do you have an issue here? Do you have a need here? Do you need more resources here? Do you need more time here? Should we push this project back? Should we hand this project off to someone else? We want to catch it early. We don't want to wait until it becomes a big issue and somebody may be embarrassed because they know they fell short, or there's an emergency because now our bottom line is being affected. We want to catch it early at the top line so that the person knows that we are here to support. We can come in with support resources before it becomes a red flag issue. We can come in with, hey, here's some options of what we can do before this starts affecting the bottom line. The same way that a smoke detector in your home is going to point out that there's a fire before the whole house burns down. We don't want the house to burn down. We want to get everybody out safely or put the fire out, one or the other, but we don't want to wait until it's too late. Does that answer your question?
So in environments where the people who most need the structure also have the most power to resist it, how do you actually install it?
Great question. So you say the people who need it the most often have the most resistance. That's absolutely correct. So how we install this is we install this as a layer that goes on top of your current process and your current system. So ERI is not a new system that we're going to replace the current one you have, and we're not going to add it on to we're not going to make it another system that you have to watch, because no company wants another system. What they want is an alert system, an alert process, or just an alarm, let's just say, that catches the fire before the fire begins. We catch the fire when there's still smoke, so that when the execution begins to drift, you know it has begun to drift, and you can catch it again at the top line or the middle line before it starts affecting the bottom line of the business. Is when things start affecting the bottom line of the business, customers get annoyed, clients are being under-delivered to, under-serviced, executives lose their jobs, operations get fired, team members get lost, departments get cut, and businesses go out of business when the bottom line starts getting affected in a negative way. So we want to catch all this stuff before it begins. So hopefully that answers your question here of how does this go in even when people don't want another system.
Exactly. So I want to talk about the data and the payoff. What the measurable differences have you seen between the organizations that execute consistently and those that don't?
Very simple. It's noting when there is drift. First of all, there needs to be a way to catch drift when it happens. A lot of organizations don't have anything in place to actually catch drift when there's drift. So first of all, you got to catch it to know that it's there. You don't have a smoke detector in your house. There could be a fire, but you don't know about it until the house is burning down. So number one is, how do you actually see it when it occurs? Number two, what do you do about it when it occurs? And number three, does what you do actually fix the issue? So those are the three things. So it's like, you take an individual person. Let's say a person says something like, I want to wake up 1 hour earlier every day because I'm going to use that hour to write my book or to sit and meditate, or I want to go to the gym. So they want to get up 1 hour earlier. And then they actually don't get up an hour early. So the first step is, do you recognize that you didn't get up an hour early like you said? You said you're going to get up at 5 instead of 6. Did you do it? Yes or no? Most people are pretty good at catching number one. Yes, I did not get up early. I failed to get up early the way I was supposed to. Most people fail at number 2 and 3, which is number 2. Okay, you identified that you didn't get up early. What are you going to do about it? For most people, the answer is nothing. They don't do anything.
All right.
This is what happens in most organizations. There is drift. Someone didn't do what they were supposed to do, but there is no immediate correction. Immediate correction simply means, hey, this is supposed to be done. You didn't do it. And when people realize that something that they were supposed to do is not done and nobody corrects it, well, what does that mean? That means it becomes normalized. Now it's okay to not turn in the paperwork. It's okay to be a little bit late. It's okay to not
Mhm.
finish the project on time. We can be a day or two behind and nobody's going to care because the last time I was late, nobody said anything. So it's completely fine. So this is where
Right.
drift usually occurs is, or where drift gets calcified in an organization or even with an individual person is when they recognize that they didn't do what they were supposed to do, but then there's no correction. Nobody does anything about it. So there
Mhm.
must be correction. The correction must be immediate and it must be direct. And a lot of
Right.
organizations, people don't want to deliver immediate correction and direct correction because of the uncomfortable emotions that come with addressing drift. That's what
Okay.
ERI is designed to identify and also give you the tools to actually do that correction in a way that is not about one person versus the other person. It's about here's the standard and here's the deviation from the standard.
All right. Correct. So, why does the execution remain such a widespread failure point, despite every organization having access to frameworks, consultants, as well as the content? Then, why does this execution remain failure point?
And great question. So, why execution remains a failure point despite the fact that every company has access to tons of information, AI, smart people, and capable staff? That's an excellent question.
Exactly.
Why? Because they're human. Because human beings drift. That's what humans do. Now, if we have a world 50 years from now where AI and computers are doing everything, then this problem will no longer exist. But as long as
Right.
humans are doing the work, you're going to have drift. Why? Because human beings get tired,
Mm.
we get headaches, we get sick, we have bad days, we don't get sleep at night. We were talking about the football game from last night. We hang out at the water cooler. We're outside having a cigarette break. We're scrolling on our phones. Human beings
Mm.
cannot be left to our own devices. Most human beings, we cannot be left to our own devices and dependent on to execute consistently with very little variation. Human beings just don't work that way. Now, there
Right.
are some humans who are more quote unquote disciplined than others. I think most people who know me will put me in that category, but at the same time, I still
Mm.
have to catch myself in drift. As maybe less
Right.
often than the average person, but I'm still human. Human beings have all of those things that I mentioned. Same things happen to anybody, even the most disciplined person that you know. The difference between the quote unquote disciplined person and the undisciplined person is that the disciplined person, when they catch themselves drifting, they immediately, first of all, recognize it. Secondly, they correct themselves. And third, they get back on track. This is what most human beings don't do. They will ignore
Okay.
the deviation. Therefore, they can't correct themselves. And therefore, there's no such thing as getting back on track because there is no track. This is the reason why
Right.
this is necessary with any organization. And if you have 10 people in an organization, guarantee you're going to have some of this. You have 1,000 people in an
Mm.
organization, this is already occurring. It's just a matter of how much is it affecting you and how much do you care to either notice or act like you don't see it. But it's absolutely happening in every
Okay.
organization in the world, even the biggest, best organizations out there. You take a company like Amazon, they have this. And one way Amazon is fixing it is, first of all, they have very tight systems that catch you when you drift. I've read articles about how they work in Amazon warehouses and they really catch you when you drift. They'll fire you. The computer will fire you if you're not moving fast
Right.
enough. And another thing they're doing is they're replacing a lot of humans with robots. But again, we don't have
Mhm.
that conversation right now. But as long as there are humans working, you're going to have drift.
That's a very great answer. So, if you had to give every executive team one structural change to make this quarter to improve execution reliability, what is it?
One structural change to improve execution reliability is immediate correction. Number one. So anyone who is in charge of anything, and mind you, you don't have to be running a company to use this. If you're a parent and you have kids living under your roof, when there is deviation, there needs to be immediate correction. Not 2 days from now, not after they do it 5 times, the first time. Immediate correction. That way it is noted in the mind of the recipient, this deviation is not tolerated. Now, if you tolerate a deviation too often and then you try to start fixing it, now you're going to get a ton of resistance because the person has learned, I can get away with this. But now all of a sudden you want to enforce rules. That doesn't work. So you have to correct immediate. Immediate correction is the number one thing. And this also applies for individuals. So any individual listening to this, there are aspects of your life in which you are deviating from the standard that you claim to want. When you catch yourself deviating from the standard, it must be recognized and immediately corrected, not just recognized and what's the word? Let's just call it excused. Many people will
Excuse.
recognize the
Right.
deviation and they'll compromise on the deviation. Well, yeah, I
Mm.
didn't get up early, but okay. I know I need to. I know I want to. I just
Right.
it was. Most people don't want that, and most people would never admit that, but this is the way most people operate.
All right. Dre, this is exactly the conversation I wanted because most people talk about execution like it's a personality trait. You just give us the architecture. Dre Baldwin, creator of the Execution Reliability Index and the author of the Third Day, find him at workonyourgame.com. This has been the Execution Gap. Until next time.